Holy fucking shit. I mean, part one was bad, but this took it to a new level. Christ. So, we have part 2 of 3 of Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths. And man, I literally just got done watching this about a minute ago before filming. And yeah, I reviewed part 1 when it came out a few months ago, and it was pretty bad. Most of the problems was that it didn't make any sense, and it was a glorified prologue. Man, I'd take that over whatever the hell this was. Because not only does nothing in here comes together, there's just so much to talk about. You know what? Let's just get into it. The first scene was already kind of throwing me off because it was just a random scene of a Joker. It doesn't really say which Earth it is. And it's a design for Joker that looks like it belongs in fucking Velma. And he's taken down by Batman that we saw in the first movie, and a different version of the Bat family, and pretty much every single person within the Bat family that you can think of. Dick Grayson, he's here. Damian Wayne, Batwoman, Huntress. Batwing shows up later. He kind of just comes out of nowhere. I don't remember him being in the first scene, but okay. And here's the weird thing. You'd think, especially since Batman is front and center on the poster for this part, and he's the main focus of the first scene, him and this other Bat family are, you would naturally assume that they would be the main players of the story. Well, they will not show up again for another hour. No, I'm not kidding. Because the first half of this movie is a damn prequel. And again, no, I'm not kidding. Pretty much the entirety of the first half of this movie is explaining everything that wasn't explained in part 1. And that should have been explained in part 1. Especially why Supergirl is Harbinger. Because instead of her getting trapped in the Phantom Zone for roughly 3 decades, I don't remember, they don't say actually how long it is, I don't know how old Superman's supposed to be. So roughly 20 to 30 years, instead of being stuck in the Phantom Zone, she was on the Monitor ship. And didn't age because it exists in several different universes at a time. It's not explained very well. And this also brings up the issue that this was never mentioned in Legion of Superheroes. She never once brought up the fact that she was on a ship with a guy who's watched countless worlds perish for God knows how long. Not a single damn reference to it. Oh, you know why? Because they wrote that one before they had thought up the entire story for Crisis. They just kind of did whatever they wanted. And that backstory, which again takes up about 40 minutes of this hour-and-a-half long movie, is intercut with the backstory of someone who will become basically the herald of the Anti-Monitor. He apparently goes by many names, but the one that is known by Beetle is Spectro. So that's what I'm going to call him. I mean, they call him by his real name Charles, but I'm going to go with Spectro. They intercut his backstory, him explaining it to Dr. Fate, and it's very poorly put together. Pretty much right off the bat, the storytelling for this movie was incredibly clumsy, and nothing came together. And another thing that's weird about this movie is that there's virtually no action. Now, I have largely criticized the action of the Tomorrowverse because it's incredibly stilted, mostly due to the garbage animation. And in this movie, it's no exception. But at least those movies had action, especially part 1. It had action. Things happened in the movie. Nothing in it was... none of the things that happened were any good or made any sense. But things still happened. Most of this movie is explaining shit and just them trying to phase planets so that they're not destroyed by the antimatter wave. That's the majority of this film. Now, I wouldn't mind if there wasn't a ton of action, if the story could have supported the film. But again, this is just this is just more filler. The first part could have been told in like 20 minutes, and this one is largely the same. Not much happened. I'm already yelling my throat dry. I'm already yelling my throat dry. But yeah, we're already, and this again could have been told in roughly 20 minutes if you cut out all the excess backstory that takes up half the film. And again, most of that could have been explained pretty quickly, but it takes for goddamn ever to pad the running time. And when the action does show up, it feels like a turn-based RPG. I probably said the same thing with Green Lantern Beware My Power, but it's like someone will like throw a punch and miss. Like take for example the fight with the Shadow Demons, who by the way, even though on the description it talked about how the Shadow Demons were such a big threat for the film, they don't show up until an hour into the movie. But they eventually fight them, and maybe someone will like throw a punch or something, and it'll go through the Shadow Demon. Then they'll just not do anything and wait to get hit. Or the Shadow Demon will lunge at them, and they'll miss or something, and then they'll wait for the hero to make a move or something. It's a damn turn-based RPG. And there's so many scenes that are here just for filler. Like, there's a world that shows up in this where somebody, I don't remember his name, where he's like the last person on this world. Like, he's the last human because apparently they were all hunted down by sentient gorillas. And he has to team up with Solovar, who, if you don't know, is a sentient gorilla, but he's from another Earth, so he's not one of the savage ones that killed everybody else. And if you haven't already figured out that Solovar was going to sacrifice himself for this guy, I'm starting to wonder if you've ever seen a movie in your life, because that's obviously what happens. And then more stupid shit starts happening because the Anti-Monitor eventually makes an appearance. Kind of. It's just a voice. It's a sentient voice with nobody there. And then Spectro starts causing infighting between the heroes. And at first, they explained it eventually, but it was like the Bat Family infighting scene was stupid as shit. They did after that explain that he was the one causing all the infighting, but why was this even in the film? Because you know what? If you take out the infighting scenes of this, you know what you miss? Fucking nothing. Because as soon as they stop, they turn back around and start fighting the Shadow Demons again. You cut out these scenes and nothing of value is lost. That's my problem with this film, and that's the problem I have with part one. You cut out half the stuff in this movie, you cut out the majority of the stuff in this movie, and nothing substantive is lost. And by the end of the film, I felt fucking nothing. I felt nothing. Watching freaking worlds be destroyed by antimatter should have me feeling something, even if the movie's bad. Hell, I still felt something. Like, I was shocked when I saw the CW version of Crisis when Earth 1 was destroyed, because I didn't think they'd have the balls to do that. To actually destroy every world. Although, the more I think about it, the fact that there are infinite worlds means there literally should be no way to destroy every single one because, you know, it's infinite. But that's more of a problem with the comics than it is with any of the adaptations because they're just going what the comics had. And, much else to talk. The animation's still awful. It's still stilted and lifeless, and that's all. I can also describe the voice acting that way. I remember the voice acting in part one being pretty decent, mostly because Matt Bomer was as the Flash, was the lead for that film, and he put a lot of energy into his performance. And any of the good actors in this movie are barely in the film. Stana Katic is okay as Wonder Woman. Her problem is her fake accent is terrible. But she's not in the movie a ton. Jensen Ackles as Batman, who, again, is the center point of the poster for this one. He's barely in the film. He has maybe 30 lines in the entire film. Superman, again, maybe 30 lines. Supergirl is here, still played by Meg Donnelly, and again, she does pretty well in the role. But again, it's just everybody else is just... It seems like half the people are phoning in their lines. Matt Ryan is back as Constantine, and this does bring up something interesting, as he was the Spectre that we saw in part one. I'm wondering if it's... Because it's supposed to be... This is supposed to be a reboot of that animated universe that they had going from 2013 all the way up to Apocalypse War. And I'm wondering, because it's still played by the same guy, I'm curious if he was picked to be the Spectre here, since he was the one who told Flash to redo everything to make a new Flashpoint. So I'm wondering if his punishment for that is to be the Spectre. That is kind of interesting, but considering it's interesting, I don't know if that's where it's gonna go with in part 3. And this is one of the worst fucking endings ever, where Kara, I think, kills the Monitor. It's not made clear because he's still breathing when we last see him. And then all the Shadow Demons, like, come together and make some armor afterwards. It's not really made clear. And it's about to, like, crush everybody, like, all the superheroes down. It's about to kill them. And then it cuts the credits. What? And at the time of this recording, I have not yet seen the trailer for Part 3, which releases in July, even though the trailer is out. I have no reason to believe it will be any better than Part 1 or 2. I really don't. And another problem with this movie is the stakes. This is the biggest problem. It is literally the multiverse on the line, yet the stakes feel non-existent. How do you do that? And the main problem is that there's no sense of urgency. Everybody is slowly doing everything. It feels like everybody in this movie should be in a fucking panic because they are trying to prevent infinite worlds from being destroyed. Yet it feels like nobody has any sense of urgency. Everybody is just kind of doing this nonchalantly, like this is just another episode of Super Friends. And again, the ending kind of felt like that. It felt like a second to last episode of a season of a TV series, not part 2 of 3 of this big crossover film. Like, imagine if the final Avengers movie, like Infinity War and Endgame, there was another one shoved in between. And instead, the first one was all bullshit setup work that could have been avoided, and then the end of the second one, Thanos is about to snap his fingers, and then it cuts the credits. That's what this movie was like, especially the ending. So, bad editing, bad pacing, mediocre voice acting, bad action, bad animation, and just an all-around just a flat line of a movie. Like, again, part 1 was bad, but things still happen. I mean, hell, as much as I didn't like Apocalypse War, it felt earned. That's another problem with this fucking Crisis on Infinite Earths, is that it doesn't feel earned because we didn't have enough movies building up to this. We had the end of one movie building up to this, and that's it. And even still, we only had, 6 movies building up to this for a big crossover? That's not enough. Apocalypse War was the 16th film in that franchise, and it was a bunch of these other ones coming together. Not a bunch of characters from universes we've never seen. Like this Bat family that Batman's with throughout the entire film, we've never seen them before. I mean, we saw a couple of them in part 1, but before that, we've never seen them. At all. Like, zilch. And again, Apocalypse War, it was poorly written. It wasn't that great. But again, it at least, all this shit that happened, it felt earned. When you saw these characters get killed, yeah, mostly it was done for shock factor, which is kind of shitty, but I still felt something. It still was an oh shit moment, like when Shazam gets a leg ripped off in the opening, or when Wonder Woman gets an arm ripped off, or someone gets killed, like someone gets brutally killed. I still felt it. Somebody gets killed in this, I don't feel a damn thing. An entire universe gets destroyed in this film, and I feel nothing, and that should not be the case. I'm giving Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 2 an F. I didn't want to do this, because this is just another direct-to-DVD DC film. Those are usually bad, but I tried to be a little more nicer to them with these scores. I can't do it for this one. I just can't. I was really generous with part 1, giving it a D+. It probably should have been a D or D-. It wasn't quite F range, but it was still pretty bad. This was just inexcusable. That's the best way to describe this film. Inexcusably bad. So that's all I got, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.